What's up, everybody? This is Zach. I'm coming to you with a special episode today. It is a collaboration episode with me and Nat from Preparedness Works. We talk about preppers, we talk about being prepared, and we talk about just having a generally good mindset towards being ready, and some controversy. He accuses me of believing that preppers are the worst, and you're just going to have to listen to find out my opinion on preppers. But before we get to that, let's just quickly get our sponsors out of the way. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow us, leave comments, and now we'll listen to our sponsors.
How do you spell Doberman Emergency Management? EOP, OEP, HVA, HMP, Thyra, TTX, Drone, PDA. Whenever you need an expert, Doberman Emergency Management field experts are there for support. Contact an expert at DobermanEMG.com today. Instinct Ready kits are awesome, compact, fully loaded, and easy to place around your office, school, campus, warehouse, wherever. I keep a quick pack in my vehicle and one at home. Imagine Instinct Ready, fully loaded Stop the Bleed kits in every school and office. Get Instinct Ready kits and training at InstinctReady.com.
Hi, diddly ho, prepperinos. This is Nat, the Preparedness Guy on Preparedness Works. Preparedness Works is part of the Readiness Lab, the place for podcasts, webinars, and training in the field of emergency and disaster services. And buckle your seatbelts. Today we have the one and only Zach Borst.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be on this and to actually hear the dulcet tones of Nat live.
Oh, yeah.
You really have brought a sort of NPR-esque vibe to the Readiness Lab podcast network.
Oh, crap. Time to end it. Just kidding. So you are a host of your own podcast.
Yes, I am the host of EM Weekly, which is... So we kind of have tried to have a little different takes on each of the world of like preparedness and disaster response and emergency response. I'm trying to build like, you're hanging out with your buddies after an incident or after the conference and you're just talking shop and like sharing war stories. And we relaunched it. We've had some success, but I'm actually going to do some revamping. So like any successful person with ADHD, when things seem to be stabilizing, you got to destabilize it again. So that's what I'm working on now.
Awesome. So you are an emergency manager.
Yeah. I have been in emergency management now for, I think I've figured out it's been about a decade, which is really starting to make me feel old. But I am getting old. Actually, I had an eye appointment last Friday and found out I need to wear glasses all the time and probably have needed to wear them for a little while. So I think I'm just going to lean into that and accept that, I've gained a lot of sage wisdom through my various experiences, but I started at the state and then I went to higher ed emergency management. Actually, I flew drones for a little while with it was Department of Transportation, and I think maybe NASA had some money in there and some DHS money, but we basically flew drones over disaster sites and built some remote sensing stuff.
What kind of drones? Like the kinds that created disaster sites or the assessment time?
Actually, we used to call it the Drunken Raven. It's the SenseFly EB, and it's this little it looks like a Nerf football with wings, and it is insanely expensive because of the sort of hardware and it's really the software side that was really cool. But my state was hit by Tropical Storm Irene is when it hit us, and it did lots and lots of damage. And we found like one of the issues that we really, really struggled with was like cataloging and sort of tracking the amount of damage and really like filling roads. Like in order to refill a road after it's been washed out, which is like one of the most common, issues, especially in a mountainous or hilly area,
right?
Is the roads get washed out. And the way to fix that before was to send like an engineer down into the hole to figure out how much volume and material is needed to fix that hole. And we were like, you know what? I bet we could do this with satellites, airplanes, and drones. And that was kind of like what we were figuring out.
Did it work?
It actually worked really, really well. Within, I know I'm going to screw this up. It was something, the accuracy was about 10 centimeter resolution. So really fine resolution compared to like satellites and airplanes. And it worked within I think it was like 10% accuracy of LiDAR. So super, super accurate, plenty accurate for a disaster, fill in the hole to like, basically restore access to places. And that was funded for like 2 years. When that funding dried up, I was really lucky that there was the first emergency management position to open at the same school. So I just kind of like took one name title and swapped it out for another. And then I was there for like 6 years and got kind of burned out, as happens in a lot of people in this field. Yeah. And did something real weird for a little while. Ran a podcast for a cybersecurity company, which was really, really fun. I did that like literally my job started the day the lockdowns happened around the country. And did that for, it was like 8 months. I really liked the company. I had a lot of fun there, but I was like, man, I'm missing out. I need to get back into like I have this skill set, stupid. And I had started the application process before we knew COVID existed. So this, like, not something where I'm like, I'm jumping ship. I don't want to deal with it. It was just bad timing. And so then I worked for Everbridge doing intelligence analysis. And now I work at Doberman Emergency Management. So we can end the podcast right there. I think I've summed up everything you need to hear about.
That's it. Thanks for joining us. So what do you do at Doberman?
So I think I do a little bit of everything. We're a pretty nimble company. We do lots of different stuff. My official title is Director of Strategy. But I think we spend a lot of time in the tactics side, just like making stuff work. As anyone who sort of works in a small business understands, like it's all hands all the time. So, but it's a lot of, so everything from, working with clients to helping run the Readiness Lab, which is the outreach side of it.
You mean the place for podcast webinars and training in the field of emergency and disaster services?
Yeah, you've heard of it. That's really good. Fascinating. And social media, not all of them, a lot of the really dumb posts that you see come out of the Readiness Lab, I can take direct responsibility for that. That's got my fingerprints all over it.
I just saw the missile launch drill one. That was really good.
Man. Inspiration struck as I was like, this is exactly, we've all been there. So explaining a meme is probably the absolute worst. It's going to suck all the fun out of it, but it's the Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal meme that's been all over TikTok and everything. But it's specifically for the missile launch alerts that hit Hawaii a long time ago. And we're never going to let them forget it.
No. Well, that poor guy.
Yeah.
From what I understand, he's like, you really want me to send this? And they're like, yeah. But it was like he's thinking real world and they're thinking exercise, and they weren't communicating that, and boom, real world.
And if I remember correctly, their naming conventions were like it's just setting them up for failure. But you know what? Lesson learned, and we all get to live there. Well, they'll live in infamy on this, and I do feel bad sometimes, like constantly like bringing it up. But it's a really good lesson, check twice, send once. Just like the old carpenter rule of thumb. Measure twice, cut once. Which I don't do. I cut too many times, too short, too long. I'm like, this is dumb. I'm working on my woodworking skills. That's actually
I've seen some of your cool stuff.
Yeah, I'm really trying to get the creative juices flowing again.
Yeah, it's really important. You talked about burnout with your one particular job. I think we all deal with it. Is this getting your creative juices flowing and having something else on the side, a way that you deal with that?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a few lessons that I have learned over my many years, because I'm getting old, as we talked about at the top of the podcast. And that is like, you need to disconnect. You need something. So I'm not like religious, but like I'm kind of spiritual, like in a way, like I sort of like, I get my zen and that sort of like focus and center from like science and like projects. Like if I can focus on like a project and kind of work through it, and then like science, I'm like in awe. Like I try to really, that was something I've really sort of worked on, especially after burning out. One thing I realized when I burned out is nothing impressed me anymore. I had no awe. I was not inspired by anything. I was just like, I've seen it all. I've done it all. Like nothing is getting me pumped. And so I was like, all right, I need to figure out how to like find this. So like I kind of lean back into stuff that I really liked as a, teenager and a kid, like weather. I'm fascinated with it. I love watching thunderstorms. It's just so fascinating. And then I was like, all right, I need to do stuff. Like I was always very good with my hands, build all sorts of cool stuff when I was a kid. I liked fixing problems. And so we started doing like laser cutting stuff, which was really fun. And then I've always wanted a wood shop. Like I feel like that's just like what you do as a dad, right? You need a wood shop to like build stuff. So I've slowly been accumulating tools. My parents moved to North Carolina a couple of years ago. I got a bunch of my dad's old tools. I like to restore old tools. That's something I really think is fun. Like I have this cool little hammer that I can't think of, ball peen hammer. And it was something, I don't even know if it has any significance to the family at all. But my dad, was in the collection of stuff. And I was like, it's all beat up and stuff. I was like, I'm going to restore this and make it look cool, but like not get rid of the character.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, this is so cool. So now I like bringing stuff back. So that's like the next thing I'm trying to work on is like taking old stuff and like restoring it to make it like new again. Got a lot of furniture stuff I want to do, like old bookshelves and cabinets and stuff. And we all went crazy during COVID, right? Like
we all had to come up with something to do.
So I just started doing everything. I started doing drawing. I started doing, I don't know. My wife was doing like diamond painting and like paint by number stuff, just to, like keep our brains going. So yeah, I think I find it really important, especially like I found that I handle stress a lot better than I did. And that was only like a few years ago that I kind of punched out from, like literally it was the start of COVID. And it's not like it didn't get more stressful after I left that job. We went right into the biggest disaster of our lives. But yeah, now that I've sort of started doing stuff, I just want to like keep doing it and trying new stuff and exploring new things.
So we've interacted with each other, especially now that I'm doing a podcast on the same network as you.
Yeah.
And the spin that I've taken here is about preparedness, usually focusing on individuals up. So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Is there such thing as being too prepared?
That's a really good question. I don't know if you can be too prepared. I think people can get into their head that they can prepare themselves out of everything, which I think is similar in a way. And I actually did a little bit of homework. I actually watched some prepper stuff before I came on here because I wanted to like verse myself a little bit in that culture and mindset. But one thing that was really funny is I was watching this video and this guy had these just drums full of food and these barrels full of food, and they were, covered and protected. And my first thought was like, dude, one drop of water gets in there and it's all gone. Like
molds.
Yeah, just done. And I was like, yeah. So like, that's where I'm like, you've invested all this time and energy in something for, and again, a lot of people, this is sort of like their hobby. It's their thing that they do for fun. So if it goes bad, you're like, oh, lesson learned, got to try something new. But I think there can be a bad mindset to that. You can sort of think that you can get through anything, which might put you in like sort of a selfish, like fatalism or something, like where you're like, it doesn't matter what happens to everybody else. Like I'm prepared. I'm going to last forever. I've got it all. And I think to me, preparedness is actually it's much more valuable in a community because, like Henry Ford discovered when he started building cars, if you have lots of people with lots of different skills working on stuff at the same time, you can get really, really efficient at stuff.
Right.
And so you can specialize in your area. You don't have to know everything. I think it's good to know lots of stuff. I'm a generalist, I think, in life. I'm not very good at anything, but I'm pretty good at a lot of stuff. So I really like, to me, like for me, my preparedness is much more sort of like skill sets, right? Like it's not like stuff necessarily.
Yeah. Well, and I've talked on here, I think before too, there's a balance because you put me in an operating room.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeless, right? Like I can't do brain surgery on somebody. I don't have the skills, even if I have all of the tools.
Sure.
But you take that brain surgeon, on the other extreme, and you put him out in the desert, and there's somebody who needs the surgery, and he doesn't have any tools. He's just as helpless, right? So it's this balance of finding your skills that match the tools that you have, and knowing how to use it, but also this like MacGyver in us that wants to be able to make something of nothing or very, very little, being able to improvise.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of fun too. I think that's maybe some of the allure of it is like, I am a gadgets guy. I really like gadgets. So I can sort of understand like that part of the prepper life where you like, you just have all these little tools that you want to do. And like, I've got a lot of little like specialized things that I've never used, but I've got multiple of them for some reason, you know? And it's like, well, if this one fails, I'm like, what situation would this fail? And why do I need two of them? I've never used them in like 10 years, but I've got it just in case. And I think I pride myself on being like, you know, and my neighbors are like, hey, does anyone in the neighborhood have one of these? And I'm like, I got one.
I'm the guy
right here. And then the stuff that I don't know, I know who, like I have my guy like that I call when I'm like, oh crap, I don't have this. I'm going to go call my buddy, Chris. Chris definitely has it.
Yeah.
So that's why I think like I sort of, and I know at some point we'll talk about this, like the prepper sort of like as a title, I'm like, I find it like like it's an aversion. Like I don't really like that title for
most people have a visceral reaction to it.
Yeah, one way or the other, probably.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, we could talk about that there are a lot of negative responses. There's a lot of negative bias out there, and I'll ask you, what do you think that aversion is caused by? Like,
so I used to be really, really, really into guns. I enjoyed shooting guns. I like the history of guns, and the culture of like gun culture has just gotten so like extreme. I just don't enjoy it anymore. Like I used to like going to gun shops and like looking at guns and stuff. And I'm getting there. I'm just going to sort of talk through this because this is like something I've recently sort of had to like come to terms with, because I was like, you know what? I kind of want to go like to a range and shoot again. I haven't shot. I mean, like, I'm in the military, so I do get to qualify. I get to shoot guns, you know, and stuff. But like, I haven't shot my own stuff in a long time, and I haven't gone like as a like social thing to go shoot guns and stuff. And I was like, I'm going to go do this. And I did it. And honestly, it was like very positive. It was like kind of a fun. It was really fun. It's fun to shoot guns and do that kind of stuff. You know, but I was like looking around and I'm like, oh gosh, like it's not what it used to be. And then I started to get like that cringe again where I'm like, man, like people just only identify themselves as this. And it makes it really hard to sort of talk about other things or like have any sort of perspective because people are just so like hardened into their perspective.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be really challenging. And maybe that's on me too. I'm probably a little bit like biased towards this as well, but.
Well, it's good to, we try to recognize our own biases, but I think you're kind of right about, I mean, gun culture. Like I'm also like very incredibly into guns, but not like a gun specs and, you know, like I've got this kind of scope and this kind of whatever, you know, it's just like.
Yeah, you wear the t-shirts and stickers all over your car. And if anyone says anything, like, God forbid you have like any view outside of.
Right. I mean, yeah, it is just like, it's like a hobby culture, like an extreme hobby culture, and it can be overbearing. But I think kind of one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm trying not to like be disparaging, but it's that. And this isn't just for guns. This is for any of these, anything that you basically use in preps or in general life that you make into your identity. And it's that you basically look at it as a solution to all your problems. Yeah. And you like, you know, obviously I'm on social media in the preparedness sphere, and you know, all about empowering individuals and helping them make good choices about preparedness and everything. And occasionally you run into some bozo that's like, well, I have guns, so everything you're stockpiling is for me. And it's like, okay, like, what are you, are you 14? Like,
well, and I think that's honestly like, and I know, of course, like preppers have also been portrayed poorly across the board. I mean, like if you were to have me describe a prepper, like I don't even know that I would really even know what to describe. Like,
right.
It's just this sort of stereotype that exists of like the people wearing gas masks and like buying surplus military, you know, mop gear. And they've got a bunker, they've got tons of guns, and you know, and like tend to be like isolationists and like, you know, maybe like sovereign citizens and like, you know, want to be disconnected from society and stuff. and like, I've got so much guns, like no one's going to take my stuff. And I'm like, well, as a community, we will come and take it if we really want to. Like, in fact, by sort of portraying yourself and like telling everyone that you're a prepper, you're really kind of like putting a bullseye on your back, versus like, I do like the stuff that I do find really interesting. And I guess homesteading is actually like, to me, that's like the positive side of like prepping almost. Like that's like prepper light to me, where like, very self-reliant, but in like a fun, friendly way, like gardening and like,
it's a creative or productive way.
And it seems more inviting. Like prepping feels like you're either in or you're not. Whereas like homesteading, you can dip your toe in, right? Like I can go start a garden, and like a homesteader's gonna be like, congrats, like let me give you some tips on how to grow like nice peppers.
Yeah.
And like a lot of the preppers and friends that I have, they'll be like, that gun won't make it. Like you're not gonna survive with this. Like you have to have this. And like it just seems like very intense as a culture. But again, like some of this is like, maybe I don't know preppers personally that are like, I mean, I know you. I think you sort of consider yourself a prepper in a degree. I don't know if you've identified yourself as a prepper. Maybe I'm outing you as a prepper, but
yeah, it's a balance.
Yeah. So
probably by any definition, I could be considered a prepper, but I use it sparingly.
Well, and I think that's like one thing that I found really fascinating is you've kind of like reopened the topic for me, and you've called me out a few times being like, but why, like why do you sort of feel that way? And I can't necessarily justify it. I guess it's just like a feeling, which is not a good thing to sort of.
And that's, I mean, there is, again, like this, there's so much reinforcement negatively towards preparedness.
But I think people taking care of themselves is that's a great thing. Like, and I guess maybe the reason I'm sort of like, I like the idea of like the communal approach to it is like, that's so, history has sort of shown like in crisis, people tend to come together.
Yeah.
I like to sort of, again, like I know who my folks are in the event of a disaster. Like we're not preppers, I'd say by any means. I mean, it's very much like, the cobbler's kids have no shoes type of situation. I do not have nearly the amount of stuff that I should, considering the knowledge and experience that I have. Right. But I've got enough stuff I can take care of myself. And I also know where the stuff that I don't have, I can go to. And we're all like pretty close. And we talk, we do talk about like, we had a really significant wind event. I mean, like 80, 90 mile an hour wind gusts. Wow. Took out power in our state in some spots for a week or more. We lost power here for like the entire day. This was on Christmas, which was especially fun, Christmas weekend. And, it was a normal power outage, no big deal. I've got flashlights and everything everywhere. Like we can take care of ourselves for a long time. Got backup alternative heating. All this stuff is covered. But we lost cell phone and data, which I've never had that happen before. And so we were like, we don't even know what's happening. Like, did something else happen outside of here? And so we kind of like huddle up and we're like, all right, like just in case, here's what we're going to do. But it wasn't like uncomfortable. We weren't freaked out about it. It was like very much like, this is the situation. We're in it and we're going to deal with it. And hopefully it's just a fluke. But that was like the first time in a long time that I sort of felt vulnerable in a way that I typically don't. And I grew up in a rural state. Like you have to take care of yourself. Like from day one, you're born, like you're stacking wood and, canning stuff and all this other stuff. So I feel pretty capable, but I've also rely on these systems that, otherwise don't exist. So we kind of like had some lessons learned, did a little AAR of like, well, what do we need that we didn't have for this that could have helped? So.
Yeah. And one thing you mentioned there is, like feeling vulnerable and you have this situation, you don't know what's happening outside and you start to wonder, but ultimately, and this is something I try to help people understand is, it doesn't matter because the impact is what matters. Like here you are, you're cut off, you have no information, no power, no connection. And it could have been an EMP, it could have been an earthquake somewhere, it could have been an attack on the grid or the cell towers or something. Yeah. Or it could just be the wind. Yeah. And ultimately the impact is how it impacts you is what matters.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think anyone who finds themselves in a situation where it feels out of control wants to have some control, right? I mean, even like the people who crash in an airplane and they're grabbing their luggage, they're doing that because they think they're going to need it or it's comfort or something, like they're like, I have to do something. I can't just do this. The same sort of reaction that you have. I like to use the excuse, the experience of when my first kid was born. I had not packed a bag and we thought we had like 2 more weeks. We literally had an appointment in the morning and it had like, all of a sudden I wake up, my wife's like, we're going. And I'm like, uh-oh. And so I'm like in it now. I'm like, crap, I need to make up for weeks of not preparing for this. And I start filling my bag. I'm not even kidding. I think it was like 6 Tom Clancy books. Anyone who knows who Tom Clancy is, these books are 900 pages long. It tells every piece of nomenclature about like firearms and tanks and everything else. It's not something you're going to read. I don't care how long the labor goes. And then I just started grabbing, like, I think I grabbed like a t-shirt and then like toothpaste, but no toothbrush. Like, it was just like, oh my God, like if I just spent a second to think about this is not what I would have brought. But that's like sort of the same thing. Like you don't know it until you're in it. And then you're in it and you're like, crap, I wish I had done something different. Yeah. Had stuff. And then you panic and you just do stuff stupidly.
Well, that's the benefit of learning from other people who have been through a situation. I mean, we've all been through some terrible situations in the last few years. Yeah. But also practicing, like running drills. One game I like to have people play, and we played at my house, is we exclude any kits that we've already established. Like, so if like emergency kits, we exclude that from the game, sure, or whatever. But then we say you have 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, we're leaving the house. Go grab everything you think we'll need, and then I compare it to like some of the checklists from the Red Cross or whatever, just for the basic necessities, and then just know what I know I need. And sometimes you'll have like half a pack of toilet paper and one sleeping bag for your entire family, and then no food or one bottle of water, a bunch of stuffed animals, some canned food, no can opener.
It's definitely, and like that's like the get out of Dodge stuff is interesting. So like a lot of the hazards here that would warrant us leaving would prevent us from leaving. So we've sort of like gone the other way, because if we have to leave, it's probably flooding or a hazmat incident, and we're basically surrounded by trains, and anywhere that would flood that would basically warrant us leaving has destroyed the road, so we're not going anywhere. So we've sort of like had to think about like, well, what does that mean? Or at least I have had to think about this. I haven't sort of put this burden on my children and family yet, but like, what would happen? Like, how do we leave? And I've got little kids and stuff, like, I'm not a completely negligent emergency manager. I've got, my
which there are a surprisingly large number of completely negligent emergency managers.
Well, and at the same time, I sort of get it, right? Like, the garbage truck driver probably doesn't want to, go home and deal with trash all like around their house. Like you just want to like unplug yourself from that. And I think there's a degree of like ignorance is bliss, right? Like even though you're preaching it, you don't really want to ever think that you'll be in that situation. For a lot of people, like you probably will not find yourself in that situation. Or I think the sort of like inverse of that is like the people who are afraid of everything, and they don't do anything. Like, right. I try to find this like happy medium where I'm like, I understand my risk. I know what I can do about it. And I'm going to make small investments. I kind of like the incremental approach to getting ready, where I just buy, I might be at like a Lowe's or something, and I'll see like, oh, I don't have this pry bar, so I'm going to buy a pry bar. You know?
Something you need. And that's a really good way to look at it. I mean, I'm sure you've seen some of the popular prepping shows. They're produced in a way to make it so that the contestants have to pick a specific doomsday scenario, and it's for entertainment's sake, because that is probably the least effective way of preparing is picking like one really bad scenario, because you're going to miss every other scenario or the more realistic scenarios. But that's that got the culture or the subculture kind of focus on that. And that's kind of something I've been working to reverse, because again, you're not looking at the disaster, you're looking at your needs, and you're like, hey, I have a need for this item. I have a need for these things. I need food. So how much am I going to store to meet my needs? How am I going to prepare it? Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. that's a really good point. And what's sort of funny about a lot of that stuff, like, there's a lot of, geardos, right? Like the gear weirdos, who just buy all of this fancy stuff, but like can't jog more than 50 feet or have like some other sort of like, they're not taking them to care of themselves physically. And that's not to like, downplay people who have functional needs or physical needs. Of course, like, you are challenged even more to be prepared. But like people who just actively don't take care of themselves and should, like, if you want to have a preparedness mindset, like health is incredibly important. And if you're just like chugging Mountain Dews and like Doritos all day and you've got, physical ailments because of that, like, you're not preparing yourself. You're not doing the physical exercise, whatever it is, to sort of like survive. That to me is like anyone who sort of tells me that they are of a preparedness mindset, but are not able to hike 10 miles. Like you're not going to survive a situation where you really have to bug out, right? Like you're going to have to stay there and hope that you can do better, or someone's going to have to come get you.
I call this the doomsday fantasy, where it basically becomes a daydream of what I would do, and it's like living your imagined glory days. Oh yeah, I could definitely take my 75-pound backpack and carry it all day, every day to get to where I want to go. It's like, man, go get that 75-pound bag and go walk for an hour and see how you feel.
The general wellness thing, right? Like forget the doomsday scenario. You should be doing this because it's important for your health and take care. Like, again, I am not necessarily the best runner. I think if you saw me running, you'd probably be like, this dude's never run in his life. Like, why is his arms and legs moving like that? But like, I run consistently. Like I've got good cardiac health. I keep checked up on stuff. And the reason is just because like, you want, like, again, sort of that generalist, right? Like I don't have all of the stuff I need to probably survive I got food and stuff I could last for a couple weeks, I'm sure. But I also know like I have capabilities to like solve that problem. Like, like we can get around that. We can combine efforts, we can combine, equipment and stuff and get around it. But if you can't, like if you fall and break your leg or you can't move stuff, you have a heart attack because you're trying to move something, then it doesn't matter. Yeah. Shovel this. That's like the number one. You were a medic, right? So, every snowstorm you have like people just dying of cardiac arrest. And again, like I don't want to downplay people. There's plenty of people who have just like genetic and other health issues that like they can't help at all. But if you can, that's your job to get really good at that and to hopefully help those people who can't. Like you want to be physically capable. So if your neighbor is stuck and they need help to get out of a situation, like you should be able to do that. Like, so yeah, I just sort of find like that I really like what did you call it? Something fantasy, like survivalist.
The doomsday fantasy.
Doomsday fantasy. Yeah. I think that is the part that really sort of turns me off this whole thing is like kind of wishing it would happen. And like trying to manifest this somehow by like just creating like terrible culture and like, and then the fatalism, like I am an optimist. I think I'm pessimistic in a lot of things, but I would say, I am a pessimistic optimist. And so like, the folks, when I'm around people who are just like, everything's going to hell, like, the climate's done, like politics are as extreme as they've ever been, the economies are going to collapse, all this stuff. And it's like, if we continue to sort of talk about this and like, you are going to manifest it and then it's all going to happen. And then I'm going to take all your stuff because you didn't. So.
Yeah. It's like it's like people don't consciously think like, I can't wait till this happens. But it's like, you want to be able to prove yourself. And it's like in the military too. There's like this, not negatively, but there's always this just in like,
you want to do it. You want to do the job.
You want to do it. And you're like not looking for a fight, but it's like if you're like, oh man, what was all that for? And but not consciously, right? Like you're not. Yeah. And once you realize that consciously, you're like, oh yeah, of course I don't want that to happen.
And war sucks. I do not want to do the war.
War is the worst.
But like, I think that's a really good point. Like, it's one thing to sort of like be of the mindset that you can versus like, I think some of this sort of, and it's not just preppers, of course, like this is across everything. Like there is a abundance of pessimism and like, selfishness that exists now. And so that's like when I try to advocate, anytime I'm talking about preparedness with like community members and stuff, it's like, honestly, if something happens, we're all in it together. So we're all going to figure it out, or we're all individually going to fail. Like that's what's going to happen. Like even if you have everything, your ability to fully sustain yourself for any amount of time, because like, I mean, you know, like even in those fantasies, there's going to be people who are going to come and get your stuff if you're not on their team. So the bigger team you have, the less likely that's going to happen.
Yeah. You know, and
that's worst scenario, obviously.
Yeah. And again, it's like not focusing on the disaster, but focusing on your needs.
Yeah.
With the kind of just keeping, like you're talking about exercising and have good consistent habits and stuff. I've framed preparedness in that way for a lot of years now. I was talking to my wife back in 2013 probably, and she kind of framed it in a way that it's like she says it's kind of like if you're reading scriptures or something like that. Like you're not just like storing that up in your brain for that one time you face temptation, right. And you know it's just like it's supposed to be something that benefits you every day. Yeah. Or she's like when you go to the gym, you're not going to the gym so one day you can lift something really heavy. It's so that you get stronger all the time. You're more capable. And you're healthier generally. So I've tried to frame preparedness that way, where it's something you do consistently that meets your needs and benefits you now, and makes you more capable in case of an emergency.
Yeah, I think I would even I sort of have even ventured away from calling it like preparedness. Like it's more like just like. I don't even know. Like, I guess preparedness is the word for it. But like when I try to talk to people about this sort of in like generic terms, it's like, you know, your friend asks like, oh, what tools, you know, I'm going to start building my toolkit. What tools should I absolutely have? And you're like, oh, well, you want like a circular saw, you know, you want a carpenter square, you want you know, a good capable drill, you know, just these like basic things. And then you could start to build all sorts of stuff with this, right? Like that's enough to get most things done. Like it's around like this, it's the same sort of mindset where it's like, well, like just know how to grow stuff. Like, do you know how to put seeds in the ground and like not eat things that you shouldn't eat? Do you know how to shoot an animal and clean it if you need to, or catch fish? You know, can you chop a tree down? Can you start a fire? You know, those things are not necessarily preparedness. You can talk about it even like camping, like what kind of stuff do you need for camping? Like, cause I think preparedness, a lot of times that kind of turns people off. It gets them freaked out. It's like, you know, like if you think you have cancer, you're like, I'm not going to the doctors. They're going to tell me I have cancer. You know, so people don't go to the doctors. They have like a tumor forming and they're like, I'm not going to deal with this. Like, I'm just going to pretend it isn't there. And I think preparedness can elicit that response in a lot of people because it acknowledges your own mortality. It acknowledges your vulnerability. And so I think in a lot of times, especially emergency managers, we take ourselves so friggin' seriously and we communicate things in such a serious manner that people don't receive the message because they're immediately turned off and scared by it. So preparedness is not going to win. The most successful preparedness campaign in the entirety of history was when Walking Dead first came out, and some genius, I know Jenny Novak, who's an emergency manager out in California. She did a bunch of stuff when I first started doing emergency management around this, but using and I don't know if she can take credit for it, but I think she might've been the first emergency manager I heard it from, is doing like the zombie readiness kit. Yeah. And like thinking about preparedness in that sense. Cause you could ask someone, what do you have in like your go kit or for preparedness stuff? And people would be like, nothing. I don't know. What do I need I don't even know what I need. And you go, what would you do to survive a zombie apocalypse? And they're like, all right, I'd have an axe. I'd have a saw. I'd have this type of weapon. I would have this much food. I'd have this backpack. I'd probably wear these clothes and these boots because these are really flexible and light. And I know I could get there. And you're like, cool. So you literally had all this but you just reframed it. Right. Which is a really good skill to have, by the way. So just trying to communicate it in a way. I think that's one thing I really like about the Doberman and the Readiness Lab is like, we do not take ourselves seriously, right? Like we talk about serious stuff and we can be serious about things, but like people that doesn't resonate a lot with folks. You want to like them to engage and accept this stuff. Like you have to like kind of be like, yeah, like this is probably never going to happen, you know, hopefully it doesn't. So what kind of fun stuff can we do to like make you better at it? That's why I like the incremental approach, like the Lowe's, you know, Walmart approach. When you're in Walmart, you're like, hey, if there was a zombie apocalypse, like what kind of stuff would I want right now? And as they're walking around, they'll be like, oh, I need this because, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, and as much as I tell people, like, don't focus on the disaster, don't focus on your needs, don't think about, like, don't pick a doomsday scenario and prepare for the worst thing. I still love the doomsday fantasy thought exercise, right? Like,
Sure.
what would you do if? And it's just fun because it's just running a mental exercise.
Right.
Like,
and it's relatable, right? And it,
Yeah.
like you said, it is fun. That's the thing. Like, it's fun.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff that emergency managers do out there is not fun. They make it really, really difficult and challenging. Like, I mean, I can't tell you how many exercises I've been to that are just like, you get there, you know, it's going to be like a day or maybe a week. And you're like, we're just checking the boxes.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't fun. And if you start to have fun, they're like, guys, take this seriously. Okay, this is a real thing. Like, you need to prepare for this. It's like, I'm not having fun. I'm not going to remember any of this.
Yeah.
Versus, like, I know, like, I had amazing fire instructors when I started my fire stuff. I was a firefighter for a long time, volunteer, and I had a couple instructors that were just the funniest human beings I've ever met in my life. And I remember I remember just stupid lines that they told me from decades ago. I started firefighting when I was 17, and I remember stuff from them. There's people that I have since known, like, within recent memory, that I'm like, I couldn't name a single word that they said to me, over the last 10 years. And so, like, trying to, like, when you're communicating this stuff, and maybe this is like why I've sort of been turned off. Maybe the prepper message is just not framed in a way that, like, resonates with me, and probably turns off a lot of other folks, is like trying to find that way to communicate this stuff so that people appreciate it, right? Like, you want to appreciate that there's risk, but people are also terrible at recognizing risk and understanding risk.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you reframe that so that they're still getting the lesson? They're still hopefully better off. And that's why I think I really like your approach, is sort of like, your videos are funny, but they're informative, right? Like the flower one, that's like your classic, right? Like, that's probably your big hit. That's your one of your top 10, I'm sure.
For sure.
It's so simple, and it is informative. Like, all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit, like, do I need to have a giant bag of flour? Like, I probably should. I like stuff that comes from flour. So, and I don't know how to make flour. So, just those little things that, like, can still sort of build that mindset, but are not so extreme and serious and pessimistic and fatalist. And, I'll sort of also key on this. So, like, when I came out of the burnout, I sort of leaned into stoicism a little bit. I was like, I'm going to get, like, stoic. I'm just going to get, like, philosophical. And I realized very quickly, like, if you get really into stoicism, you become a selfish jerk. Like, it is so easy to be like, nothing else matters but me. Like, I just need to be, like, focus on my own, well-being, and nothing else matters. And so I've sort of, like, now swung the other direction. I still like a lot of the stoic, lessons and sort of moralities, but, like, I'm now, like, leaning fully into, like, comedy and humor, and I'm really going back, and I did stand-up comedy for a while, and I'm sort of heading in that direction again, because, like, it's just such a good way to communicate and keep people comfortable and engaged and interested in what you're saying.
If you have any good emergency management or emergency preparedness jokes, send them my way.
No, I don't. I will. So we're working on a podcast that'll be coming out that's actually going to be very humor based. I'm very excited about. So that's
Nice.
a teaser. This is breaking news. I don't think I've done this on any other podcast. So, but, like, even John, from John Scardina, who's the CEO of Doberman, he had this, like, podcast called Movie R, AAR, like, after Action Report. And it was, like, joking around about disaster movies and stuff. And, like, all of this stuff that we do takes very seriously, and, like, leadership stuff. And, like, we have these really important people on it. And of course, people want to listen, they want to learn. But, like, some of the dumbest stuff from that has been, like, way more successful. Like,
right.
Episodes just get so much attention and interest. So I'm, like, really trying to, like, toe that line of, like, how do I take that I know works, and then, like, translate it into something that I still think people need to know and understand and recognize.
Yeah. So, real quick, what is an experience for you in which preparedness worked?
Oh man, I've actually had a lot of recent stuff. So again, much like the fitness stuff, I think another area that is completely neglected is medical skills. It's so important. And I'm a TCCC, Tactical Casualty Combat Care instructor in the Air Guard. And before that, I was a self-aid buddy care. And last year during the Super Bowl, we had a friend over, and she was helping clean up, and she cut herself just absolutely terribly. Her hand was just ripped wide open. She starts to get really uncomfortable, starts to feel lightheaded. She's like, oh my gosh, she like yells, Zach. And I'm like, what is happening? Like that was like just the way the tone of her voice, I was like, oh, that's different.
Yeah.
And so I go over there and I'm like, oh, all right, we're dealing with this. And because I have a medical background, I was an EMT, I've got the training. It was like, no big deal. We're going to just get you patched up. We'll get to the hospital. You're definitely going to need stitches. And then like a few months later, one of the neighbor kids running around, jumps off the porch, just gnashes his mouth, splits his lip down the middle. Looks like he's got a second mouth, like, a vertical mouth now. And everyone's like, oh my God. And it's like, all right, we'll get you cleaned up, get you packaged, and you'll go deal with this. I used to be like the black cloud of all of the agencies I belonged to too. Everything bad happened under my watch. And I used to come across car accidents all the time driving around. Like I sort of just fall into disasters really often.
Yeah.
And it all kind of works, right? But I think the biggest thing is just like the mindset. I think that's the most important part, is just like having that mindset of like, not a big deal. Like even in the worst, absolute worst imaginable disaster, you kind of have to just like know what you can do. And, it's like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So like start to chip away at it. Don't look at these problems as like insurmountable, because that I think is the survivor mindset is like, I can get through this, even if it seems impossible, versus like, nope, there's nothing I can do. So like, I think there's no specific situation really where I've sort of felt like this helped, but like I've had so many situations where I'm like, I've got the tool and I've got the sort of knowledge and how to use that tool.
And
it has prevented an emergency. It's
the training or experience to be able to approach it calmly. That's super important.
Yeah. And I know that's not something like that necessarily comes naturally. It's just, a lot of it's just exposure to a lot of stuff, and you just become like a calloused, crusty old man. And
no, I am all about doing like drills and exercises, even with your own family, just practicing just some of the little skills once a month. Just have a little family night where hey, let's go through our fire escape plan, and what would we do in a tornado. And
what's really interesting is like the people that I've found that are really, really good at like that type of stuff are usually the most unassuming folks. It's like, you were in the military, you walk into a restaurant and you see the dude in the 9-line shirt with the tattoos and like, all of this stuff. And they're like, I'm military. Like, this is all that exists on me. And then, you're walking by the guy who's like just kind of sitting there quietly. And the guy with all this, he's like, did a short tour, did nothing, never sort of got out of just that like crappy attitude of the,
bro vet.
The bro vet type thing. Not to downplay vets, man. Everyone who does the service, my hat's off to you.
Not everyone. My hat's not off to all of you, but
there are some scumbags out there.
Just kidding.
And a lot of them write books about it. And but like the people that I've met that are just like quiet, and like, they're jovial and they're like calm, and something terrible happens. And like the one person like freaks out and flexes and they're like, oh, I'm going to deal with this. And then the other person just kind of casually walks over and fixes it. And you're like, oh, that's the person I want to be. That's the person I want to have next to me. Just these like really quiet, confident, like people. And that mindset comes from like just knowing, right? The people who have to fake it with all the gear and all the stuff,
peacocking.
They're the ones, the peacocking guy. Like those are the people you don't want anywhere near you in emergency, because they're going to get themselves into trouble. They're going to get you into trouble. They're usually looking for trouble. This is part of that like whole manifesting problems. It's the same people. I have a buddy who is a EOD tech, and he was talking about how there's this. A lot of people just say like, just do something, right? Like just run, just go do it. Be like aggressive. And he's like, you know what? It's actually okay to pause, take a breath, think about it, and actually figure out what you can do. Because that's how you get blown up, is you run into it. And I think not enough people sort of have that mindset. But like, like you said, like I have enough skill set now that I don't panic, which gives me that time, through training and experience and knowledge, where I can pause, even in crisis. And people have told me, like, you look like a psychopath, something really bad's happening. And I'm sitting there kind of like, all right, how do we fix this?
Yeah.
And in that moment, I'm like, all right, I know how to do this. I know I've got this tool, so we're going to do that. Versus the person who's like running in and getting electrified or running into the gas or getting, whatever. So.
Okay, final word.
This rude. I went around in circles there. I tend to do so.
Perfect. Zach Borst, are preppers the worst? I had to force that to rhyme.
Yeah, I know. I have to be. I have to change how I'm going to reframe my way towards preppers. They're not the worst. I want to know preppers. I want preppers around me because they can be very helpful. But I want the preppers who are friendly. I'm not saying that all preppers are not friendly, but I want the friendly ones who are going to help me get better. They're going to teach me. You want to be a good prepper? Teach everyone around you a little bit of knowledge. Teach them how to use a tourniquet. Don't do that selfishly. You're a scumbag. If you're doing everything selfishly, we're all going to come take your stuff, and it's just, it's not a good mindset. Like I'm a huge believer in the rising tide lifts all ships, right?
Yeah.
I want people to help each other out. So if you're preppers out there, help those folks around you who aren't prepared. Don't look down at them. Don't disrespect them. Everyone comes at this from their own way. They, we all it takes all kinds, right? So, if you're a prepper out there, prove me wrong. I don't think preppers are the worst. I don't. You're a victim that we don't have to probably go rescue at some point or deal with. So that in and of itself is a value. But
yeah, and that's what I've been trying to do is take what we learn in emergency management and help people make their preparedness more effective and less sensational and whatever else, but also help emergency managers do some of the same.
I think that's one of the things that doesn't translate necessarily from the prepper to emergency management world is sometimes preppers are looked at as like this thing we have to deal with more than it is like they're going to self-sustain. It's like, oh boy, like this person's refusing to evacuate. Now we're going to have to do it. And that person might be perfectly capable of staying, but then because we've had the experience where a lot of people think they know and they can survive everything. And now we have to send a team to go pull them out because they're so cocky and they thought that they had it all figured out and now they can't.
Yeah, whoops.
I think that's where maybe some of that negative, look at this, I'm having a breakthrough right here on there. Maybe that's where some of it is because I've had to go do that. But I think at the same time, like being prepared is 100% a really important skill set but it's a holistic thing. It's not just gear. It's not just food. It's not just guns.
You need to validate it too.
Yes.
Validate all your preps.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I'll tell you what, that huge food store that you've had for, years, when the hurricane hits and you open it up and it's full of ants or mold or whatever else, your prepping is done. You're not a prepper anymore. Now you're someone in need of it. And guess what? All those people that you were like, I look down on, you're going to want their help. You want to be a team player. So I'm just a fan of team sports. I want everyone to sort of help each other out. And, it's just like, again, the optimist. Like I want to be the optimist.
Yeah. All right. Where can we find you, Zach?
You can find me on LinkedIn, all of my EM Weekly stuff. Listen to EM Weekly, like that, subscribe it. I'm going to air this as well on my podcast because we're team players here.
Absolutely.
And social media, all the EM Weekly stuff. I keep my personal stuff separate just because I like to trash talk. So
fair enough.
But my LinkedIn is very professional. But yeah, the EM Weekly stuff is the best way. Listen to the podcast and get a sense of who I am. And I'm always anyone out there that thinks I'm wrong, I'm open to knowledge. So if you think you know better than me, please share that information. I want to be better at this. I want to be a better prepared person as well. I'm always learning.
Awesome. Well, it's good to have you. Thanks for coming on. And everybody remember that preparedness works.
All right. Thank you everybody for listening to that episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Nat has the Preparedness Works podcast. That's part of the Readiness Lab. It's a very good podcast. He has a very soothing voice. So it's just good to listen to Nat talk about cool stuff. So make sure you check that out. Again, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, rate us 5 stars, go on to Apple so that the algorithms are fed and happy and more people can hear us and we can talk to more people. And thank you for listening. We appreciate you all and we'll talk to you later.